What's up, metal and heavy music fans? This is Flight of Icarus with MetalTrenches.com. Please do subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, because there are plenty more videos for you to check out. But today I'm going to do something kind of fun. I've been seeing all these YouTubers doing these tier ranked videos. Mostly I saw some around like fast food, and then I saw some metal people doing ones around like technical death metal and other stuff. And I was like, no. We need to get to the real issue here, and that is who are the best new metal bands out there? This is super serious stuff that we really need to get to the bottom of. So that's what we're going to do today. I kind of looked around to see if somebody else had already made a tier list for this, and I found two, and they were garbage. They were missing a lot of stuff. And obviously, this is not a fully exhaustive list. There's probably some bands on here that other people wouldn't have included. And then I left out a few, like, Spine Shank and things of that nature that are a little bit more kind of one-hit wonder kind of stuff. There may have been other bands I totally forgot too. But let's just get right into it so I don't bury the lead here. So first off, we got Cold. I don't know how many of you even remember Cold, but they had an album that I actually particularly enjoyed. And the funny thing, too, is I got their album from one of those mail-in deals where it was like you pay like a penny plus shipping to get, 15 albums, and then it's a total scam, and they start charging you monthly and this whole thing. My mom managed to get me out of it, but I got their album, I think it was 13 Ways to Bleed on Stage, and they're kind of like a Stained ripoff, basically. That album's decent, though. There's a song that they do with Aaron Lewis at the end called Bleed, and yeah, I mean, it's not horrible. It's serviceable. But after that, they did like a song with Weezer called Stupid Girl, and it was bad. Like, things did not go well for them after that album, and I haven't heard from them since that sophomore album came out. So I'm gonna have to put these guys, I'm gonna give them the D. I'm gonna be at D rank here. Stained, Break the Cycle, talked about this before. Still really enjoy that album. There's a reason it became so big. It was pretty good. Like, it was kind of like one of a kind at that time. It still sort of stands out. The songs are good, the lyrics are good. Dysfunction is a decent album too. So they've got they've got one decent album under their belt, and then one like really, I'd say really good album under their belt, and then another band that kind of fell off after that, because everything post that is pretty much garbage. So I think this is tough. I'm saying maybe C, but they do have some longevity. People still remember them. People still listen to them. Playing with maybe B or C. I'm going to put them at C for now. Mushroomhead, another masked group. Not as popular as Slipknot. I never really got into them. I don't find them to be super memorable. I'm going to just go ahead and keep it short, put them at D rank. Power Man 5000, same deal. Like, I had fun with them, when Worlds Collide. I played a lot of Tony Hawk, and that song was burned into my skull, and I love the music videos and everything, but they don't really have a lot of longevity. I give them some points for innovation. They were a little bit different because they had that like sci-fi aesthetic, but ultimately, if I'm thinking about the music, I gotta put them at D. Chevelle actually have had a pretty decent career, a little bit rocky and inconsistent. I'd say about every other album is good, has been my experience. I actually really enjoyed Sci-Fi Crimes and ended up buying it. So they've been putting out some decent stuff and still some decent singles these days. I'm going to put them at B rank. Papa Roach. Cut My Life into Pieces. This is my last resort. That was the song that when I had just started high school, and was getting hazed by the football team, and they were all driving around. This was like bro new metal, with a little bit of faux edginess to it. I owned that album. I did not like any of their other stuff. I think they got super poppy and annoying after that. Um, D rank. There's gonna be a lot of D rank here as I'm looking at it. Deftones. Deftones have to be S rank. Of all the bands here, they are potentially the only band that I personally, and again, this is just my opinion, of course, think that they still put out top tier music that's actually worth listening to. I don't just buy their albums just because I'm a longtime Deftones fan. It's because they still innovate. They still do great stuff. I didn't love Gore, as many of you know, but I've loved all their other albums, and they put out great stuff like Koi no Yokan within the last few years. And they have staying power. They've innovated. They brought really new meaning to the genre, breathed new life into it, and just did things differently. So for that, I got to give them S rank. I don't know how many of you remember Taproot, but these guys have a special place in my heart, which is why I included them, because they do kind of fall into that sort of more one-hit wonder tier. But I love the album Gift. That's just a great kind of early new metal album that not a lot of people talk about, but I find that whenever I bring it up, people get excited about it because people do tend to remember it. But again, not a lot of longevity here. They were kind of just copying what everybody else was doing. And I did not like that song Poem, which was actually one that got bigger. But I hated that song. I did not particularly like that album, and they definitely kind of fell off the map after that sophomore effort. So I'm afraid, I think, as much as I have a special place in my heart for them, to include them on this list, they have to go in D rank. Soulfly. Love these guys. I'm going to get some hate for this, but I think I've said it before. I'm a bigger Soulfly fan than Sepultura fan. I like how they really embrace their regional elements. And yeah, you know, musically, there's still just kind of that typical new metal stuff, but the way they incorporate the tribal stuff and the drumming and all these different elements, it made them stand out, and they put out a couple decent albums, especially the first two. I still listen to the self-titled and Primitive pretty regularly, and it holds up for me, anyways, personally. And I like the vocals are pretty interesting, and they're still relatively popular now, even with the, you know, Max left obviously many years ago now, and they've still managed to do pretty well, especially in South America. But people still know them here too. So I'm going to go ahead, and I think I'm going to give Soulfly a B. I feel okay about that. System of a Down. Big Innovators, another band that definitely stands out because they got a very different sound. We're trying different things. We're kind of just doing their own thing. And again, I love their first two albums in particular. Self-titled, just super heavy. So many great moments. And then, of course, Toxicity was just an amazing moment. I remember the first time in my friend's basement, I saw the music video for Chop Suey. And it was another one of those like life-changing experiences where I was just totally entranced by what I was seeing and what I was hearing. And even though I didn't love Steal This Album, and I also I know a lot of people really liked Mesmerize and, you know, that two-parter that was more progressive. I did not. I didn't enjoy that, but I know a lot of people did. And I also, again, I appreciated that they were continuing to innovate and try new things and just go their own way. So I got to give them credit for that where it's due, even though I wasn't entirely happy with the direction that they went. It's an A or a B, and I'm leaning towards an A for now. Maybe I'll change my mind. Cold Chamber. I love these guys. They're just like the epitome of new metal, especially I love looking at old photographs of them with all the piercings and the tattoos and the crazy hair and all that. Fun music. It hasn't held up very well. I went back and listened to the self-titled, which was an album I really loved early on in these days, but it's not something I particularly enjoy listening to anymore. I actually still kind of enjoy chamber music. That's my personal favorite. And the Dark Days has actually kind of grown on me too. Nothing special. I mean, there's nothing particularly exciting about these guys' sound. I wouldn't say they've had like a massive impact compared to some of these other bands. But I would say they're a little bit better than bottom tier. They've had a few albums that were memorable as opposed to just the one. So I'm going to go ahead and put them at C, I think, even though it's kind of leaning towards D. Mudvayne's a tough one too, because I fucking love LD50. That is just an amazing album. If we were just ranking nu metal albums, I would probably put that at A or potentially even S tier just for that album. But we're looking at the band as a whole here. I thought that they kind of got more and more generic actually as they went along and less heavy. Something I liked about them was that they were like, they weren't like technical, but they had a really killer bass player. The drumming was actually somewhat technical in certain places, and they were good musicians. Plus, they had that fun stage presence too with the face paint and everything. But yeah, they're still popular, but they haven't really done a lot of note, in my opinion, since LD50. Although I know the second album's okay. I'm forgetting the name right now, which doesn't really bode well for them. I think I have to give them a C, maybe a B, but leaning more towards a C right now. Limp Bizkit, as much as we all like to joke about them, they were kind of in a league of their own. They kind of did things first in a lot of ways, and for better or worse, were a big sort of starting place for the genre. People remember them, again, for better or worse. Man. They had a couple of albums that really did well. They charted. They had catchy songs. I still love listening to break stuff. $3 Bill Y'all. All the way through Hot Dog Flavor Water really was kind of like their peak, and they had a couple on there more so. And it pains me to do this actually, but if I'm thinking about like impact on the genre and on other bands and memorability and quality songs and quality releases overall, even though I'm a bigger Mudvayne fan for sure, I kind of have to put Limp Bizkit in B, not really necessarily for quality, but just for what they did for the genre as a whole and their kind of consistency. Like, even if you didn't like what they did it very consistently. And credit paid for what it's worth there. Kitty, I enjoyed some Kitty back in the day. Their stuff hasn't held up particularly well, but they're still around. I know they just put out like a documentary not that long ago, but you don't really hear them talked about a ton. They're not one of the top bands. They definitely toured with them, but I think I ultimately need to put them in D tier just because they haven't had much of an impact. They're not talked about as much. Maybe if I went back and listened to like the whole of their work, I might change my mind, but for now I got to put it there. Head PE, I got to give them extra points right off the bat for another band that really sounds different. And this is something I said to my friend just in general about nu metal. If there's one thing I will give to nu metal, it's that all of their vocalists really sound different. You can pick them up out of a crowd, at least the bigger ones. You know who they are without having to see who's playing. Like, Jonathan Davis, even Chad from Mudvayne, System, even Stained. Like, all these people have very recognizable voices, and that's something I think I appreciated about the genre, especially as somebody who was doing more vocals than anything else back then. So Head PE definitely had that quality, very different. A lot more hip hop. They were even on a hip hop label to start, if I recall. And interesting mix of like punk and hip hop and nu metal and groove and all this weird stuff. not particularly great quality all the time, but they had two pretty decent albums, kind of 2.5 maybe. And again, that extra point for just being different. So I'm going to put them at C tier. Korn's got to go A tier. If we were just looking at impact on the genre and like staying power and memorability and all that, I could potentially put them in S, but their later albums aren't as good as Deftones. Like if we're reserving S for like top of the top, like still putting out good stuff, I can't really give that to Korn. Like they still put out really great singles to this day, but not really great albums. They've gotten very inconsistent, but those first 4 albums from the self-titled through Issues are like the blueprint of quality nu metal from the time, and I still love all 4 of those albums to date. And then I keep up with their lead singles from the newer stuff too, because they can still put out some killer songs. So I think they deserve an A for that. Linkin Park, gotta give it to them for their first album, Hybrid Theory. That was another like big eye-opening moment. They were doing something different. It was everyone was excited about it. So many singles on that album, really great. People remember them. Obviously, people were really sad about Chester, and credit where it's due. Again, I do not like anything really past Hybrid Theory. That's the only album I think is really worth people's time, but they managed to gather a following and make an impact in their own kind of way. So, I mean, again, I'm a bigger Mudvayne fan. I would even say I'm a bigger Stained fan than Linkin Park. But if we're considering all the factors here in terms of what they meant to the genre and music as a whole, I may have to put them in B. And that feels weird to me, but at the same time, like, I think I have to pay credit where it's due. Nonpoint is D for me. I love that song, Rabia. And, it's always cool to have bands kind of, they went their own way too. They did a lot of songs in Spanish, which was cool. But not a lot different to their sound, and not a lot of staying power, not a lot of great albums. Like, I couldn't even name for you the album that Robbie is on. And I guess that's kind of partially me. Somebody else may have a different opinion. Static X, only industrialized band on this list, and they had a couple really solid albums. I'm particularly fond of Wisconsin Death Trip, but Machine is pretty damn good. And even some of their later stuff, actually. I really liked Cannibal, which was actually a nice kind of return to form, because he started doing this like singing style that I didn't like for a while. And that album, it felt like kind of a sequel to Wisconsin Death Trip and Machine. And they had another one after that was pretty decent too. So, and again, people remember them. They were still playing shows all the way up to the end. I know they're trying to do this like comeback now without Wayne, which just feels so wrong. But I am going to give them a B, because they've got the consistency, they've got the innovation, they've got the staying power, and the image, the great tall hair, the slip into a Slim Jim haircut. Great stuff. POD, I think I'm going to put around C. People remember them. They had their moments. Satellite was a big time where you could not escape hearing, that Youth of the Nation song on the radio. That great, I can actually hear the drums in my head and the vocals from that. Talk about earworm stuff that gets stuck in your head. Yeah, but they're not like, they didn't do a whole lot after that. Not super memorable. People don't really talk about them now unless like one person brings it up and then everyone goes, oh yeah, POD, I remember them. But not a lot happening of note there. So I think C is fair. They're a little bit above these other bands in D, but not by much. Seven Dust. I'm going to put them at C as well. They had their own following. They had some really solid songs. I'm forgetting the title of the album that I actually own from them, with the kid with the apple on his head. That was pretty good, although that one is another one that kind of didn't age well. Like, I picked it up for $1 out of the bin, and I was like, oh man, I remember this album, and I remember loving it. And I put it on, and I was like, man, there's there's actually a lot of filler on this album. But they managed to do their own thing. I hear bands now that I get requests from, and I've reviewed them, and I said that their vocalist sounds like Lejean Witherspoon. And the response is often, thank you. Like, he was a big influence on me. So clearly they were doing something right. And I do like Lejean's voice, and it was different. He was a much more kind of soulful singer in a genre full of just pure screamers mostly. So yeah, C feels about right to me. Slipknot, I'm sure a lot of people would put Slipknot in S. And again, kind of like Korn, if we're talking about the top of the top, the cream of the crop, who really influenced and sort of designed the genre and carried it forward and made it what it was, sure. But ultimately, for me, it's more of an A. Again, I love the self-titled. I love Iowa. For a while, I enjoyed their third album, which was super popular. But I didn't like the popular direction they went. I missed their more kind of aggro style. I still contend to this day that the self-titled and Iowa are among the heaviest, raunchiest, darkest, most aggressive albums I've ever listened to. I'd put them right up with some of the brutal death metal and black metal that I listen to now. Like, it's much more packaged, but it's still got this rawness to it. And I feel like they lost a lot of that after Iowa, and it kind of hurt them. But props to them. Again, I got to give credit where it's due for grabbing a massive following, staying relevant, and continuing to put out albums that people enjoy, even if I'm not really one of them. So for that, I give them an A. And last but not least, we've got Disturbed. Another band that I never was a huge fan of, but I'm going to put them, I think, at B. Feels fair, again, because they've amassed a following. They're still have been putting out albums that people have enjoyed. People know their name. Like, I could go out and be like, hey, Disturbed, and even people who aren't really quote unquote metal fans would be like, oh yeah, wah. They did some things that, just caught people's attention. Wasn't really for me, but put out a number of albums, not just one, that people were interested in. And I remember people that I knew constantly going to Disturbed shows and talking about how much they loved being around that band, and talking to the lead singer even, and how he was kind of a cool guy to them, and all that stuff. So I think they deserve a B. So that's my ranking. I like to keep S for, like, we're talking near perfection here, and Deftones to me is the only one that quite fits that category. But those ones in A, they're close, and I'm sure plenty of other people disagree with me. If you want to do your own ranking, I will leave the link to this tier maker down in the description, so you can make your own. You can post it. Feel free to post it on our social media. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all that stuff. So you can find us there. Let us know what you think. Argue with me. I will read the comments. I actually kind of enjoy it for the most part right now. And also check out our Patreon. If you keep coming back to the channel, you enjoy it, and you want to make this more of sort of a real experience. You want to feel like you're kind of a part of something, and treat us like that monthly magazine that you used to get brought to your door. Because I'm hoping that you're walking away from this with, a good laugh, some enjoyment, and first and foremost, new bands that you hadn't really heard of. So if you're new to the channel too, stick around and check out these other videos, because there is plenty of new music coming out. We've got the podcast and all of that. But for now, I will wrap it up there. This has gone long enough already. Flight of Icarus signing off. I will see you in the trenches.